a simple summer afternoon turns into a life-changing moment for Ethan. His stepmother, his father, and a secret that's about to explode. You won't want to miss what happens next. I never expected that Tuesday afternoon in Austin, Texas to be anything out of the ordinary. As I pulled into the driveway of our suburban home, my mind was preoccupied with thoughts of the long workday I had just finished. My name is Ethan, and at 29, I was still living at home while saving up for my own place. It wasn't ideal, but it had its perks, like not having to worry about cooking or laundry. As I stepped out of my car, the warm summer air hit me. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawn. From the backyard, I could hear the sound of laughter, instantly lifting my mood. It was probably my stepmom, Rachel, playing with our golden retriever, Buddy. Rachel had been part of our family for nearly 6 years now. She was younger than my dad, in her mid-40s, and had brought a sense of life back into our home after my mom passed away. At first, I wasn't thrilled about her presence, but over time, I grew to appreciate her energy and kindness. I made my way around the side of the house, loosening my tie as I walked. The sight that greeted me in the backyard made me pause. There was Rachel, sitting cross-legged on the grass, her light brown hair falling loosely down her back in soft waves. She was wearing a casual sundress that I had never really noticed before, hugging her figure in a way that made me look twice. Buddy was bouncing around her, his tail wagging excitedly as he dropped a slobbery tennis ball at her feet. "Come on, Buddy, fetch." Rachel laughed, tossing the ball across the yard. Her laugh was melodic, carefree, and it stirred something inside me that I couldn't quite explain. I stood there for a moment, just watching her play with Buddy. There was a grace in her movements, an infectious joy in her expression, and I found myself unable to look away. As Buddy returned with the ball, Rachel glanced up and caught sight of me. Her face lit up with a warm smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Ethan, you're home early," she called out, waving me over. I felt a strange nervousness as I approached, which was odd because I'd always felt comfortable around her. "Hey, Rachel," I replied, trying to sound casual, though my voice came out a bit tight. "Thought I'd cut out of work a little early today." She patted the grass beside her, inviting me to sit. "Well, I'm glad you did. Come join us, Buddy's full of energy today." I hesitated for a second before lowering myself onto the grass next to her. The scent of her perfume, something light and floral, filled the air, making my head spin just a little. Buddy dropped the ball between us, his eyes moving eagerly from me to her. Rachel let out another laugh, the sound sending a strange shiver through me. "I think he wants you to throw it this time," she said with a grin, her blue eyes sparkling with amusement. I picked up the ball, trying to ignore the wet slobber covering it. "All right, Buddy," I said, winding up for the throw. "Go long." The ball sailed across the yard, and Buddy took off after it, his paws kicking up the grass. As we sat there, taking turns tossing the ball, I found myself becoming hyper-aware of Rachel's presence. Every time her arm brushed against mine, it sent a wave of energy through me. I stole quick glances at her, noticing little details, how the sunlight shimmered on her hair, the soft curve of her neck, the way her chest rose and fell with each breath. What was going on? This was Rachel, my stepmom. She'd been a part of my life for years, and I had never thought of her as anything other than my father's wife. But today, it felt different, like I was seeing her for the first time. The realization made my stomach turn with both excitement and guilt. "You seem a little distracted," Rachel said softly, cutting through my thoughts. "Rough day at work?" I blinked, realizing I'd been staring at her. Yeah," I mumbled, feeling my face heat up. "Just a lot on my mind, I guess." She tilted her head, studying me with those intense blue eyes of hers. "Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head quickly. There was no way I could explain what I was feeling. These sudden, confusing emotions that seemed to be clouding everything. Rachel reached out and gently placed her hand on my arm. The touch was light, comforting, but it sent a jolt through me that was anything but innocent. "You know, you can always talk to me, right?" she said in a soft, caring voice. "About anything." I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yeah, I know. Thanks, Rachel." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound being Buddy's panting as he flopped down between us, exhausted from all the play. The sun was starting to sink lower, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink. It was a breathtaking evening, but all I could think about was the woman sitting next to me. As the light began to fade, Rachel stretched, arching her back in a way that made me look away, my mouth suddenly dry. "We should probably head inside," she said, brushing bits of grass off her dress. "I need to start dinner soon." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We both stood up, and for a moment, we were standing so close that I could feel the warmth of her body. Our eyes met briefly, and I thought I saw something in her gaze, something that made my heart race. But then the moment passed, and Rachel was already walking towards the house. "Coming?" she called over her shoulder. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Yeah," I replied, my voice sounding hoarse. "Right behind you." As I followed Rachel into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. The easy, comfortable dynamic we had always shared was now replaced by a tension that buzzed in the air. An awareness that was both thrilling and terrifying. I watched as Rachel moved around the kitchen, starting dinner preparations. Her movements were smooth, almost graceful, and I found myself mesmerized by the simplest actions, like the way she reached for a pan or how she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Ethan." Her voice startled me out of my thoughts. "Would you mind setting the table?" "Of course," I replied quickly, glad to have something to do, something to distract me from the confusing thoughts racing through my mind. As I laid out the plates and utensils, I couldn't help but wonder if I was just imagining things. Was this tension all in my head? Had Rachel felt it too? The way she'd looked at me in the backyard, the lingering touch on my arm, were those signs of something more? Or was it just my overactive imagination playing tricks on me? I shook my head, trying to clear away those thoughts. This was Rachel, my stepmom. I'd known her for years. Whatever I thought I was feeling, it shouldn't, go any further. But as I glanced at her across the kitchen, catching her eye as she smiled at me, I knew deep down that this wasn't over. Something had shifted, and it wasn't something that could easily be undone. The rest of the evening went by in a blur of stolen glances and accidental touches. Every time Rachel's hand brushed against mine as she passed me a dish, every time our eyes met across the dinner table, I felt that same electric jolt. It was maddening, the constant awareness of her presence, the tension hanging in the air between us. After dinner, as I helped her clean up, the kitchen felt too small, too intimate. We moved around each other in a delicate dance of unspoken tension, the air thick with words left unsaid. "I think I'm going to turn in early," I finally said, unable to bear the tension any longer. "Got an early start tomorrow?" Rachel nodded, her lips curling into a small, knowing smile. "Of course. Sleep well, Ethan." As I climbed the stairs to my room, I could feel her gaze following me. At the top of the stairs, I turned to catch one last glance at her, our eyes meeting for a fleeting moment before I disappeared into my room. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind was consumed with thoughts of Rachel. I replayed every moment of the day, every glance, every touch, every word. My brain told me that what I was feeling was wrong, that I needed to push these emotions aside. But my heart was pulling me in the opposite direction. I must have eventually fallen asleep because I woke with a start the next morning. The first rays of sunlight were peeking through the curtains, and my dreams were still fresh in my mind, dreams filled with vivid images of Rachel that made my cheeks burn with both embarrassment and longing. Groggy, I made my way downstairs, hoping a cup of coffee would help clear my head. As I stepped into the kitchen, I froze. Rachel was already there, her back to me as she stood at the counter, humming softly to herself. She was wearing a silk robe, one that clung to her curves in a way that made my breath catch. "Morning, Ethan," she said, turning around to face me with a bright smile. "You're up early." I nodded, unable to find my voice. She handed me a cup of coffee, and as our fingers brushed, that now familiar surge of electricity rushed through me. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her blue eyes searching mine. "Not really," I admitted, taking a sip of coffee to cover my nervousness. Rachel leaned against the counter, her robe slipping slightly to reveal the smooth skin of her collarbone. "Is everything okay? You seemed distracted last night." I swallowed hard, my heart racing in my chest. "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied. "Just work stuff." She raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Ethan," she said softly, stepping closer to me, "you know you can talk to me, right? About anything." Her voice was so sincere, her expression so caring, that it almost broke me. Before I could stop myself, the words spilled out. "It's you, Rachel. You're what's distracting me." Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a brief second, I thought I had made a terrible mistake. But then, something flickered in her gaze, a spark of something I hadn't expected. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "what are you saying?" I set my coffee down, my hand trembling slightly. "I don't know," I admitted. "Yesterday, in the backyard, something changed. I saw you differently, and now I can't stop thinking about you." Rachel was silent for a long moment, her eyes locked on mine. Slowly, she reached out and took my hand in hers, her fingers warm and soft against my skin. "Oh, Ethan," she said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of emotions. I felt it too, for longer than I care to admit. My heart raced at her words, even as my mind struggled to process the reality of what she was saying. "But what about Dad? This is wrong, isn't it?" Rachel sighed, her thumb gently tracing circles on the back of my hand. "It's complicated," she admitted. "Your father and I, things haven't been good between us for a long time. We've grown distant. But that doesn't make this any easier." I nodded, understanding the weight of what we were discussing. "So, what do we do?" Instead of answering, Rachel stepped closer, her free hand coming up to cup my cheek. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I do know I can't ignore these feelings anymore." And then, before I could say another word, she kissed me. Her lips were soft and warm against mine, and for a moment, the world around us disappeared. The kiss started out hesitant, gentle, but quickly became more urgent, fueled by emotions that had been building for so long. My arms instinctively wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, and I could feel her fingers threading through my hair. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless. "Wow," I managed to say, my head spinning. Rachel laughed softly, resting her forehead against mine. "Yeah, wow," she agreed, her voice laced with a mix of wonder and uncertainty. But as reality set in, guilt quickly followed. "What about Dad?" I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel sighed, stepping back slightly but still holding onto my hand. "Your father, he's been having an affair," she revealed, her voice tinged with sadness. 4 months now. I've known for a while, but I didn't know how to tell you." A surge of anger flashed through me at my father, but it was quickly replaced by a strange sense of relief. Our actions, while still complicated, didn't feel as wrong as they had a moment ago. "I'm so sorry, Rachel," I said, squeezing her hand. She shook her head, her smile sad but understanding. "Don't be. It's not your fault. And in a way, it's given me the courage to admit my feelings for you." We spent the next few hours talking, about everything. About her marriage to my father, about the feelings we had both been hiding, about what the future might hold. It was intense and emotional, but also liberating. By the time the conversation ended, we had made a decision. For now, we would keep our relationship a secret. We needed time to figure out what to do next, how to navigate the complicated web of emotions and relationships we found ourselves in. It wasn't going to be easy, but the connection we shared was undeniable. We couldn't just pretend it wasn't there. Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I settled into a new, delicate routine. On the surface, everything seemed normal. We went about our daily lives, interacting with my father as we always had. But beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of excitement, a secret that bonded us closer than ever. Every glance across the dinner table, every accidental touch as we passed each other in the hallway, sent a thrill through me. We stole moments whenever we could, quiet conversations late at night, a brief touch of hands when no one was looking, a quick kiss when we were sure my father wouldn't walk in. It was risky, exhilarating, and yet terrifying all at once. About a month after that first kiss, we found ourselves alone in the house one evening. My father was out on another business trip, though we both knew he was likely with his mistress. But instead of dwelling on that, we reveled in the opportunity to finally be together without the constant fear of being caught. Rachel and I were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, though neither of us was paying much attention to the screen. She was curled up against my side, her head resting on my shoulder, and I was acutely aware of every place where our bodies touched. "Ethan," she said softly, turning her head slightly to look up at me. "Are you happy? With this? With us?" I looked down at her, taking in her gentle features, the vulnerability in her eyes. "Happier than I've ever been," I answered honestly. "What about you?" She smiled, reaching up to brush her fingers along my jawline. "Incredibly happy," she whispered, "but also scared. What we're doing, it's risky. If your father found out." I leaned down and silenced her with a kiss, soft and slow. "We'll figure it out," I promised. Together. Our kisses grew more heated, and soon enough, the movie became nothing more than background noise. Being with Rachel felt natural, even though everything about our situation was unconventional. That night, for the first time, we made love on the couch. It was passionate and tender, and more intimate than anything I had ever experienced before. Lying together afterward, I knew, without a doubt, that I was in love with Rachel. The weeks turned into months, and our secret relationship deepened. We became experts at hiding our feelings from my father, sharing stolen moments when we could, savoring every glance, every touch. But as time went on, the strain of keeping our relationship hidden started to take its toll. It was Rachel who finally brought up the subject one night as we lay in bed together, her head resting on my chest. "Ethan," she said softly, "I think it's time we told your father." My body tensed immediately, my hand stilling in her hair. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice thick with anxiety. Rachel sat up slightly, her piercing blue eyes locking with mine. "I'm sure," she said, her voice steady. "I love you, Ethan. I don't want to keep hiding this. Your father deserves to know the truth." I nodded slowly, knowing she was right, but dreading the confrontation to come. "Okay," I agreed, "we'll tell him." The next day, we sat my father down and told him everything. His reaction was explosive, to say the least. He shouted, he accused, and for a moment, I thought he might even strike me. The room was filled with accusations, anger, and tears. It was messy and painful, but it was also cathartic. After all the yelling and chaos, a strange calm settled over the house. It turned out that my father had been looking for a way out of his marriage for months. While he was hurt and angry about my relationship with Rachel, he admitted that he was relieved to have the truth out in the open. In the weeks that followed, our lives changed dramatically. Rachel moved out and filed for divorce. I also moved out of the family home, finding my own apartment in downtown Austin. I needed space, away from the memories of my childhood home, and away from the tension that still hung in the air between my father and me. It wasn't easy. Family dinners became awkward, filled with long silences and unspoken tension. Conversations with my father were short and strained. But through it all, Rachel and I held on to each other. Our love, tested by the disapproval of others, only grew stronger. We knew it wouldn't be easy. There would always be people who wouldn't understand or accept what we had. But we were determined to make it work. Now, as I sit here writing this, it's been almost a year since we revealed the truth to my father. Rachel and I are living together in a small house on the outskirts of Austin. My relationship with my dad is still complicated, but we're working on it. He started dating someone new, which has helped ease some of the tension. Looking back, I never could have imagined how my life would change that sunny afternoon in the backyard. But as I watch Rachel move around the kitchen, humming softly to herself, just like she did that morning, I know that I wouldn't change a thing. Our love might have started in an unconventional way, and it certainly faced more challenges than most relationships, but it's real. It's deep. And it's ours. And that's what matters. Rachel turns to me, catching my eye with that smile I've come to cherish so much. As I cross the room to take her in my arms, I feel an overwhelming sense of peace. Whatever challenges lie ahead, I know we'll face them together. Because that's what love is, choosing each other every day, standing strong in the face of adversity, and building a life filled with joy, trust, and unwavering commitment. As I pull Rachel close, kissing her softly, I know that this love, this life we've built together, is exactly where I'm meant to be.